Alright, so today I'm going to attempt to update my previous tutorial that I made on the CPM mod, or Customizable Player Models mod, just because, one, it's been a minute, two, a lot of things have changed that I kind of want to amend or fix, and three, I kind of want to go into it with a more cohesive plan than I did before, because this is not a modeling tutorial per se. There are a million of those out there, but I find that it's much more like helpful to have a tutorial for the mod itself, as opposed to like, oh, like here's how you model and then here's how you get to the actual like workings of the mod. So basically, in general, the customizable players mod, like, you use it if you want to modify how your player model looks. Like, obviously, you can see this is not normal vanilla skin territory. There's bits, there's bobs, there's parts jutting out. It's animated, so it's very much like you have to do all the work yourself. It's involved, it's complex to a certain extent. It doesn't necessarily have to be. I've kind of made this one more complex than maybe even I would like, but really, to each their own. But the point of it is you can adjust how your player model looks, moves, how they hold items. You can add certain gestures, like as you saw, I was sitting on the ground like normal style. I didn't have to install any like sit plugin or mod. You can have certain things where it's like, okay, like they have like this expression. You can give them other expressions as well. But yeah, without further ado, I should probably get into it. So the first thing that I'm going to say right off the bat is you can model in the mod itself. It does have a built-in editor. You can open things up, you can move parts around as you please, you can change how things are structured over here. And here is my first major deviation. Don't do this. Don't try and model in this mod if you can help it. You can. It's possible. It is by no means the easiest solution. So, since the last video, there is now a plugin for Blockbench that you can use. And for the sake of, like, I think for the sake of demonstration, I actually uninstalled it because it is not available by typical means. So if you want to install this plugin, you go to Plugins over here. You hit Load Plugin from URL, and I'm gonna link the GitHub repository in the description if I remember to do this. But basically, this is the link you're gonna put in here. You're gonna hit Confirm. You're gonna hit this dialog box, and this plugin will enable you to load .cpm models where you otherwise would not be able to. So if I wanted to open up a given project, yes, confirm, and I'll get into this. Here it is. Here is the project in question. So it might, depending on if you have a model already made or if you're doing it from scratch, it may pop up with some dialog boxes. This one did because I already have things that are CPM mod exclusive. For starters, like, I think just in general, Blockbench is a way easier program to use off the bat than CPM because it works very similar to not a toned down version of Blender, but a simplified one. It's just cubes. You can manipulate textures very easily, like UV mapping is easy, like this is automatic. Obviously it looks kind of haphazard just the way I've done it here, but it's a lot easier than trying to do it in Blockbench, in CPM, which has very specific constraints. It's not always the most intuitive to use. And you may wonder, you may have noticed, if you are particularly astute, that there's an animate thing up here. This is the part that I have to clarify. Don't use this for animating yet. From what I have gathered, it seems like in the future, once the plugin is developed, where you can animate in Blockbench, if you're interested in using a like keyframes, a timeline, having these specific panels all laid out, I would not recommend using this method because when I've tried in the past and imported it into CPM, it gets messed up. The animations don't play correctly. It adds a bunch of unnecessary frames, and it messes up the interpolation between them. So I would recommend model your guy in Blockbench, take it into CPM to actually do the animation part. It's way easier in my opinion. I will stress, if you're going to model something, I would recommend watching a tutorial on how to do it first. It'll save you a lot of frustration with animating. You will learn what bones are, you will learn what parenting is, you will learn how groups of things work together, and obviously as you get better at modeling and subsequently animating, you can draw from real life examples. Like I've had a lot of times where I'm like I have to like physically walk across somewhere to like understand how something's supposed to work. But yeah, if I were to export this model to get to CPM, let's say I didn't have this, if I were to export this model, I would go over here, I would export as Customizable Player Models Project, and oh, I think it's because I already have it saved, but yeah, it'll pop up with a dialogue, and you can save it wherever you want, and then you open it up from that location in here, and everything should be correct. I will say sometimes just because of the slight discrepancies between Blockbench and CPM, you will have to rename or reorganize your bones, and that's fine. It shouldn't take a long time if you know what you're doing. If you don't, I would recommend just try and organize it as best you can in Blockbench, because trying to do it in CPM is difficult. Like, for example, I didn't know that, okay, if you want to move something in Blockbench, you right-click it, you hit move. Let's say I want to put it under left arm, and then you place it, and you can't drag it. That's not how that works. Like, I'm clicking it, I'm dragging it, you have to do that instead. It's not, like, it took me an inordinate amount of time to figure that out, because I didn't know if it was I didn't see it documented anywhere, at least. That's a different issue. So, I guess the next step is, let's say you have a finished model, you want to animate it. It's probably going to look a little stiff. Like, maybe you don't want your guy to stand default style, you know? So, first thing you do, you are going to want to go here, add parts, sorry, not add parts, tools, convert vanilla parts. So, like, you see how there's all these H's here? This is the vanilla head. And you can see that, obviously, it doesn't look the way it's supposed to. This is the part that controls, like, hiding these vanilla parts is essential to getting your animations working and looking correct. Because if they're still there, Minecraft is going to default to making those move instead of the things you actually want to have move. Which, if you're using this mod, probably you don't want that. If it's not a very complex model, like if you're just adding a couple things to your head, like adding 3D hair, you don't really need to do this. If you have actual, like, if you are really going into it, if you, let's say, are really invested, you have, like, a dragon model, okay, yeah, you need to hide the vanilla parts. That's the first thing you do. You go to Tools, Convert Vanilla Parts, and then subsequently, let's say you want to change the armor, you would go to Add Parts, Armor. I already have it added, and then you have to hide each one individually. You can change how these are modeled too. I usually just don't. I issue the armor. I don't care. So you're actually modeling, like, oh, like, these are the parts that you actually want to move. If you move these in your if you move the base vanilla parts in your animations, it's gonna get kind of hairy if you don't know what you're doing. But yeah, let's say you want to do, like, a normal standing animation. So this is the one I have. So there are several animation types. If you saw it here, there's polynomial looping, single, linear looping and single, snap, and trigonometric looping and single. So polynomial, I think, is the most general, sort of all-encompassing case. Actually, a better example would be running, because if I want to have a more fluid looking movement, I would use polynomial, because all of the interpolation is done automatically. It resembles real movement. So, like, you see how it's very, like, it's smooth, it goes between each particular frame without stopping, and it rebounds more naturally. Whereas, let's say I was going to do linear. So linear is just like, okay, it goes from point A to point B, and then it stops, it doesn't rebound, it goes straight there and straight back. So it looks a little stiff. There are use cases for this. I personally do not use this type very often. Another type is trigonometric, which is a little... It's useful, like, if you have parts that are, like, moving mechanically. I've seen it used to, like, rotate, like, a microscope head. I thought that was interesting. Like, I was like, oh, okay, that's, like, a good use case for it. And then there's also snap with no interpolation, which means every frame is its own sort of distinct entity. Like interpolation, there's no blending between each frame. And this can be used to great effect. Like, for example, this character is all... It sort of resembles stop motion to a certain extent. You know, the only issue with it is that I found is that you have to spend more time making sure each individual frame looks good, because you can't, like, rely on the interpolation to do it for you. It's a different approach. Like, this animation has 6 frames, whereas usually I would do just 4, because I'm accounting for, like, transitions between parts. But yeah, that's the sort of general type. I should probably also just go back to the other animation. And also, okay, so for all of these animations, like, I've put in obviously a lot of work in them, but I should probably explain, like, what each one of them is. So standing is your normal, like, box standard animation. Like, if you're idle, walking, you're walking, running, sneaking, you're crouched. And I usually have to correct for crouching because Minecraft puts your model in the ground to lower your sort of viewpoint and to lower your hitbox. And I have to correct for this very often. So typically, I'll, like, finish the animation and get it how I want standing on this box in particular, and then in game I'll have to, like, okay, like, see how far into the ground I am, raise it up by, like, a unit or 2, and then I'm good to go. Same thing with where is it? Sneak walking. I have to fix that too. It's just a little quirk, because it is working within the bounds of Minecraft. Falling is when you're, like, falling from a great height. Let's say you're, like, falling from 200 blocks up. Sleeping. It's when you're in a bed. I usually don't do this one because no one cares. But if you if you have something that obviously isn't going to fit in a bed, then you should probably do this. Riding is boat. It's horse. It's minecart. It's also, subsequently, if you have a sit plugin or a sit mod, this is the animation that is displayed when you are using it. Similarly, I also have to correct for how vehicles work in Minecraft. I have to, like, do it and then, okay, how far into the ground am I? Get that working. Flying is elytra. I don't usually have elytra, so I don't usually do it. Not a very good example, but that's what it is. Dying. I have not gotten this one to work because Minecraft automatically puts in, like, the keel over thing. Like, you know how, like, if you kill a pig, it tilts over to the left? I haven't found a way to correct for that. Probably someone has. I haven't because it's just not something I've put a lot of time into. Creative flying is when you're flying around in creative mode. What is it? In water is when you are in water and you are not actively swimming or walking. So, like, this is like if you're sinking in water, it would do that. Jumping, this is a normal jump animation. Sneak walk, trident spinning, this is when you have a trident, like with Riptide or something, and you are standing on ladder, climbing a ladder, very self-explanatory. Crawling is when you're on the ground. This used to not be here, it used to display the swimming animation. So, yeah, like, as you see here, because the swimming animation and the crawling animation look a little similar. And then there are these 2 other ones that I've added, which are surprise tools that we'll get to later. Then there's held item, this is how you hold items. So, bow, blocking, archaeology brush, crossbow, eating, drinking, etc. And then some other ones that are under this category for some reason, such as head pitch and head yaw. This is health, so I imagine that this is like, okay, this is depending on how much health you have. Hunger, depending on how much hunger you have. Light level, which is very interesting. Speaking for if you have a voice mod, a voice chat mod enabled, which I never have, but you could certainly, like, implement, like, oh, okay, talking animation. Helmet, okay, like, armor head versus skull. Chest plate, body versus elytra. And then leggings and boots are just as is. Effects, hurt for if you take damage, on fire for if you're burning to death, freezing if you're freezing to death. Display and menu is what your model will look like if you're in the creative menu or survival menu. You go into your inventory. First person model view is like if you have the first person model mod installed. I personally never do, but if you are a fan of that, it's great. Voice muted, again, a voice chat thing. VR, have literally never messed with this because I don't own a headset and I'm broke. First person hand. Let's say you have nothing in your hand, and this is the model that plays. Like, if, let's say, like, oh, you want your hand to look all creepy when you don't have anything held, this is what you would do. using container, this is the animation you have playing to everyone when you are like opening a chest or a furnace. And invisible, this is what happens when presumably you have a potion of invisibility. Like, you can probably see yourself, like, and that's what you would see. There are also certain types of, let's say you're starting from scratch, you have no animations whatsoever. I've realized also, just in reviewing this footage, I have neglected to explain this side of it at all. Let's say you want to create a new animation. You would see this pop up: pose, additive, type of interpolation, and whatever you want to call it. So this would just be like a useful shorthand if you're interested in that. So these are all the poses that you saw before. They are color-coded by how they work. So global always plays. Player head. This is like if you have a player head on the ground or displayed somewhere, this is what would happen if that was there. I'll get to these. These are the poses that play, the yellow ones. These are the poses that play if the mod is installed client side but not server side. So this is useful like if you're just using it for personal use. Maybe you and a friend have it installed, but it's not installed on a major server. Like, they would be able to see these regardless. These are fairly self-explanatory. These green ones, these only play if they are installed, if the mod is installed server side as well. So the falling, jumping, creative flying animations would not play whatsoever. Display and menu, these play if the condition is met. So like the parrot right animation. It wouldn't happen if there was no parrot on your shoulder. You wouldn't have the freezing animation play if you weren't freezing to death. That kind of thing. The red ones here are dependent on what item you are using. So holding left, holding right, aiming bow, trident, crossbow, etc. These sort of green ones down here, not to be confused with the other green ones, these green ones are dependent on like player conditions, like air, health, light level, speaking for voice chat, and pitch and yaw. These blue ones up here, you may notice that I said that these sort of sitting and tiptoe animations. So pose, these can only play one at a time, so you can't have like the sitting and the walking animation play at the same time. You can't have crawling and swimming play at the same, or that's not that example. Crawling and speaking at the same time. That would make sense. So if you have a custom pose, you can't have this play at the same time as any of your other animations. Gesture is a little different. This is like expressions, things that play separately. So let's say you have like a gesture. It's like, okay, well whenever this is activated, my character looks mad or upset or frustrated or happy. This can play at the same time as the walking pose. So like, let's say I'm walking, or I'm standing, and I have my goggles on. This can work at the same time. Whereas with like walking and standing, I can't do both at the same time. But gestures, you can't do these at the same time. So I can't have my goggles on and look mad. It's one or the other. I could make a gesture where I'm mad and I have the goggles on, but that's separate. Back to this. Toggle layer. So this also requires a server-side mod because it says it in the pop-up here. If I were to, oh, I didn't mean to make a new one. I have one here. Hands folded. So like, if I were to, I have this thing where it's like, okay, it obviously doesn't work for all of them. Like if I'm standing and I want to have my hands folded like this, it's like, okay, well this plays when I have this selected, and I have to manually unselect it. The finish or the setup and finish animations. Let's say I want to lead into my walking or running animation. I would make a setup animation to do the lead up. The walking animation would play, and then when I stop walking, when I release W, whatever key you're using, the finish animation plays. This is like the stopping walking. I never use these, but I know that they are commonly used for like if you want to have that additional layer of polish and value layer. So this is like it. You could have a gradient of an animation. So like you can be like, okay, I'm 50% this, I'm 75% this. So it's like you can toggle through it that way. That's what all of that means. So like, let me open up just this animation here. The frames, I have 4 frames here. You add frames by pressing this button here. You delete frames very slowly by pressing this button. You can play through the frames by pressing the play button here. Adjust the duration of your animation here. There's this little area up here by the edit button. You can duplicate the animation, make a copy of it. You can copy the frame of the animation, or you can make it go in reverse, which I guess you could do if you wanted to. I'm not sure. I don't know what the case is here, but it's useful to have. And if you, let's say you copy a frame, you have the option to paste the frame. You also have the option to paste, if you have a part selected, copy part pose, paste, or mirror the part pose, which just rotates it, I guess, along an axis, which I never end up using. I find it difficult to work around. What else? Oh yeah, rotation, position, and render scale. I usually do not use render scale, but this is like, okay, if you want to have squash and stretch, you would use this. It's your X, Y, and Z axes. Rotation, you can press with just right or left click for 1 degree, press shift and hold for for 0.1 degrees, and then control for 10 degree increments. I usually do not use the thing here. I actually don't know what this is called. These circles here, I don't use them because they like to snap to fixed angles. They snap to like 5 degree increments, and like sometimes I just want a little bit more control over that. I want to be able to control it, see how it moves. Position, same thing. I don't use this ever. I just use these. But the controls are the same. It's 1 degree, 0.1 degrees, or yes, or 10 degree increments. This is for if you have a part that is not using a texture or just a color. You would select a dialog will pop up, say like select the color for this. That would be this. Visibility. So let's say this is not the same thing. Visibility is not the same thing as this. You cannot make these you cannot make the base vanilla parts invisible, but you can make the things in them invisible. So let's say for whatever reason I don't want my character to have a right arm while walking. I would have to go in frame by frame, make it invisible, and now there's no right arm. It is not the same thing as turning it off in the editor. It will still display in the animations. Like, it's still here, but I've disabled it just for casual viewing. Skin layer settings. Presumably, if, like, let's say you have a skin layer, and you want this to be conditioned, like, something plays when you have this layer enabled. I never use this, but this is where that is. Priority, which I will get to later. It's a whole other thing. This is where you change priority. Button order. I imagine this is just organizing, like for gestures, organizing where that is. One thing I will say, for custom poses and gestures, you see how I have 3 poses called sitting. And if you want these things to play at the same time, they all have to be labeled the same thing here. It's just called new custom pose, but I have to label it sitting on purpose, or else when I play sitting, they're not all going to play at the same time. Okay, so there are a couple sort of major distinctions here, or not really major distinctions, but quirks. So bow, crossbow, and spyglass. And you may think, okay, well, what's the issue here? So when you are initially setting up your model, you will probably see that you can add parts held item position. This is where the item that you are holding rests in your hand. So if you see here, at the bottom of my arm, I have a right hand item. Presumably, if I were to get it loaded up, it's in my hand. It's in the bottom here, as opposed to, let's say I got rid of it for some reason. It wouldn't be situated up there anymore. It would probably be situated... Oh. Well, it's supposed to be there. It would probably be situated actually more up here because it's accounting for, like, oh, this is where your hand would normally... And it would probably sit up here, not down here where I originally had it. So you would ordinarily have this. For spyglass and bow, it is a head item. It is parented towards your head. This is how you look at things. So if I were to hold a spyglass, you'd be like, oh, okay, it's like a head it's a head item. Wrong. Sorry, a hand item. Wrong. It's a head item. It follows your head. So you need to actually... What I've done and what I've found based off of someone in the CPM Discord, which I will also link, and I'll probably also put a screenshot of it up here, just as like, okay, this is the person that thought of it, not me. I do not claim this idea. Is I have a separate set of arms, that are up here, and they're attached to the head, because these will move with the head. And these animations are based on, like, okay, if this is never going, like, this arm is not going to move with the normal right arm animation. Now, the only thing that I found with this is that sometimes it can get kind of jank depending on how your model is structured. So, for example, under normal circumstances, if I am at an extreme angle with the spyglass or the bow or the crossbow, or even the blocking or not the blocking animation, the crossbow, sometimes my elbows will be here and not actually on the side of my body, which to a certain extent you have to sort of allow, like, okay, this is never going to be perfect. This is not an animation program in the sense that things are going to be stitched together like in Maya or in Blender. This is a Minecraft mod. You must allow yourself certain limitations, and you have to sort of acknowledge, like, okay, is it worth it to get it perfect, or is it worth it to play the freaking game? But for most scenarios, if you're looking for a bow or spyglass animation that is not going to be super obtrusive and, like, distract to the fact that, oh, like, this doesn't work properly, you are going to want to add these extra arms, parent them to your head, and hide in the actual animation your right arms when they aren't being used. It's a little tricky. It will take some trial and error. This is the way that I found that it works. So, like, for example, if I were to leave here. Oops, wrong guy. Wrong guy. If I were to get a spyglass right now, so you can see, like, from the front it looks good, but, like, hey, if you, like, look at the shoulder, it's kind of misbehaving a little bit. But to an extent, it's believable enough. It's not perfect, and it never will be, or at least I haven't found a way to perfect it. But it's believable enough to where it's not super jarring. There are other sort of things that I must explain. So, this model I actually made shortly after a certain update, which enables head pitch and head yaw. So ordinarily, before this, when you would move your head up and down, it would actually, like, parts like the head, like long parts like hair and, like, let's say you have, like, floppy ears like this, they would sort of stick out and it would look bad. Like, how do I don't know how to exemplify this without completely removing the animation, but I guess I'll have to do that. Where are you? Ah. If I were to delete this head pitch. So, no matter where I tilted my head, these would always stick straight out. So if I were to turn it like this, it would look like this, and it would look like this where the ears are like this. It wouldn't look... They wouldn't obey the laws of gravity, basically. I don't want to say these changes, but now, with the head pitch and head yaw thing, you can basically... Like, it allows these to move depending on the angle of the head. Same thing with the hair. Like, the hair would just stick straight out. But now, with this update, it doesn't. So, head pitch and head yaw. Nope, I didn't mean to exit out, but that's fine. Head pitch and head yaw are extremely useful. They work a little counterintuitively, to my knowledge, because... Oh. Well, hopefully it's not gone. Hopefully I didn't kill it. I do want to discard unsaved changes. Head pitch. Let's go. So, these frames look a little strange. Oh yeah, also important, for head pitch and head yaw, you're going to want to do linear single, because otherwise, at extreme angles, whatever you're doing is going to flop back and forth. Let's say I did polynomial looping instead. Or not polynomial looping, polynomial single, because I don't want it to repeat. I did okay. I go to head pitch, and they're gonna go back a little bit, which you don't want. With linear, they stay the same. It goes from point A to point B, does not deviate. So that's an important use case actually for linear. Same thing with the hair. You see it going up and down. It's not flopping back and forth like it ordinarily would be. But for head pitch and head yaw, frames 1 and 3 represent extreme angles. Frame 2 is like the neutral angle, like if you're facing straight ahead. I don't know why, but for some reason, like the head's pointed straight down here. But like I remember this being strange to figure out why it didn't seem to like want to behave. It would, like, the head would be in the reverse position of the ears. It was a whole mess. So this may take some finagling, some trial and error, but it does work now. That's the important thing. For head yaw, there's other sort of use cases for that. So let's say I had head yaw, and you want to have, like, a guy that's, like, kind of mischievous looking, and, like, as they turn their head, like, they sort of cock their head as well. Like, that's a fun thing you can do with it. I usually don't find as much use in this, but it's nice to have. I'm glad it exists. Light level based. Okay, let's say you have a character that also glows in the dark. You have light level based. Nope, you have light level based animation. So light level in here, it goes from 0 to 15, obviously. And you see that I have these color changing things based on the light level. So 0 is absolute pitch black darkness. 100 is like it's bright outside. I don't know why the tail. I think I may have accidentally hidden the tail, but that's fine. So I forgot that I forgot to actually explain how to do this. So a couple things to note. If you are trying to make something glow in the dark in general, the entire part becomes glow in the dark. So if you need to make only part of something glow in the dark, you need to account for that. Let's say I make this part emissive, or it's using the glowing eyes effect as stated here. The entire arm looks like this now, and not only does it look like that, it's translucent. You can see through it, and I'm assuming you don't want that. For example, this area right here that I'm having sort of have the glow in the dark effect, it's the same size as this cube, but it only has the texture that I want glowing on it. If I were to texture it with the skin and the dots, it would not have the effect I want. The skin would also be glowing. Furthermore, when I said individual UVs, I mean I basically have 4 separate tails that I'm hiding and showing based on light level. So I have a base for full light, I have a base for light level 10, I have a base for light level 5, and a base for light level 0. 3 out of 4 of these are hidden by default. Each one on each frame of the light level. If I can find it. If I can find it in here. Light level, no arms. So pitch black. At light level 5, I've hidden all of the pitch black. I have only the light level 5 enabled. Light level 10, I have both light level 0 and light level 5 hidden. Light level 10 enabled. And at level 10, sorry, at full light, all of the prior 3 are hidden. Only full light is showing. So not only does the part become fully emissive at a given moment, like the entire fin up here is like that, but you have to hide and show different parts depending on the light level you want. And you also have to have each one like in the model. Like again, there are 4 separate tails here. You just can't see 3 of them. So that's how you get that to work. An important thing to sort of wrap your head around if you are new to this program, as well as the concept of additive versus non-additive animations. So, for example, I'm going to use this very simple model that I made. I think this is like the first one that I made. And you can see that the arms are completely untouched. Like, it just looks like a vanilla Minecraft skin. Only the legs are substantially different. So, in the walking animation, you see that these arms are moving in sync with the legs. And this is because, in that particular animation, I made it not non-additive. So because I made it non-additive, it is not affected by existing vanilla animations. What this means is I can move the part as I please, without needing to worry about, like, the default Minecraft animations playing. If I were to get rid of these, I hit Control, I hit Clear All to remove the part's movement from the animation. You can see that it's not in sync because this is mimicking, like, the traditional, like, Minecraft walking animation you would get. So if I were to open up a world and test that right now, give it a second to think. Give it a sec. you see that the arms and the legs are not in sync because it's like, oh, this is how fast the player's arms would move if it was just a normal skin. And it looks it looks like passable, but it's not great. I would prefer them to move at the same time. The way I would fix this is I would go back, I basically just undo all that, and they're not affected by the vanilla animations again. I'll explain what I'm doing in a second. So you see that they actually move the way I want to again. If I were to make this additive for whatever reason, it would be moving... First, I would do this. It's mimicking the parts moving. You see how they're moving like this. This is the normal walking animation. And it's playing the thing that I've already animated on top, which is not what I want. So if you're doing a more in-depth thing like this, you want to make it non-additive by unchecking this. And also you have to kind of commit, because you see that if I do that and I hit the button, sometimes it likes to misbehave. So just make it non-additive from the start. What I was doing with this, so let's say you have substantially more things parented under the left arm. You would ordinarily have this hidden by default, and the actual arm you want to animate is down here. To make sure the left arm does not move in the non-additive animations, you basically have to indicate, like, okay, it is moving actually, but not really. So what I typically do is I change it by a 0.1 of a degree on every frame that I have, to trick it into thinking that nothing has actually moved. And I do this from the outset. Like, this is force of habit at this point. It basically tells the program, okay, well, it does have an animation, even if the animation is so imperceptible. It's overwriting the vanilla animation, don't worry about it. So if you want to have a animation like this, that's perfectly fine. The exception that I found out the hard way, let's say I'm doing this, and I want the character's head to bob while I'm doing it. I would animate the head separately, because I need it to be additive. If I make it non-additive, I cannot move my head while I am walking. The head will stay in the same place, and I will show that to you very shortly. So, for example, once I start moving, I'm walking, I'm turning my head, except you can't see it at all. I've made the head additive, or non-additive rather, and it's not registering the default Minecraft-like head turn animation, which I need to have if I want to look like I'm moving my head or turning my head as I'm walking. So that's why it's important to have the head be additive. Now this does run into the case of, okay, I want to have a cohesive walking animation, you need to have these two separate, and you need to animate the head separately from the body, which, if your model is really complex, can be difficult. However, with the use of this menu here, the test menu to have the walking animation, what I do is I typically have the head, and like every frame that I notice is out of sync or out of whack, I fix it. I just make incremental changes. It takes some trial and error. The only thing is that this point at the bottom here, at the base of the head, this is where it is rotating from. So if you're looking up, it is rotating along this point. If you're looking side to side, it's rotating along this point. It is not rotating along the back of the head, or the front of the head, or like even the middle of the head. This is where it's rotating from. So you need to keep that in mind if you want your animations to look natural. Another example is like this running animation. This is the head. I didn't label these very well, I was just starting. So you see that the legs are moving. If I were to enable the vanilla animation by clearing this, it would play the running animation on top of the one I already have. I don't want that, I need to make it separate. And the running animation for the head, it looks strange because all I've done is the head. Left the entire rest of the body alone, and then when I combine them both, it looks like... Well, I need to actually fix the, the leg. I need to fix the leg. It's a complete and coherent animation. And then I've animated the head and the arms and the legs separately. So that's sort of how that works. Your mileage may vary based on how you choose to do the additive versus non-additive animation. Again, other thing that's important to note, additive animations stack. So you have a bunch of additive animations. They will all play at the same time. They will compound against with each other as long as they are all in the same pose. Non-additive animations, if you have an additive animation with a higher priority, I'll get to that later, it will override the lower priority non-additive animation. They will not stack. Okay, I'm redoing the priority section because I did it really bad the first time. So basically, how this works is, let's say you have something that you want to play only under certain circumstances. So for example, for this character, I have an animation where they have their hands behind their back. That's fine. That's all well and good. When they're standing, it's no issue because I don't have the arms moving in the standing animation. So it can just exist as is. But let's say, for the sake of example, I adjust the priority to be -5. I'll explain that in a second. I go to running, so I go to walking, I enable it. Wrong one. I enable it. 2 sets of arms. That's not supposed to happen. I want this character to be walking while they have their hands behind their back and they aren't walking normally. So the priority system is, I had this at -5, or sorry, I had 5 before. If I go to the animation where I'm moving their arms in the walking animation, you see it's at -3. This animation is going to play first. It's basically, so I guess the best way of explaining this is like, it's getting through, okay, like, let's say you have a bunch of priorities for some reason. It's like, okay, priority -10, what's happening? Okay, cool. Priority -9. Is there anything in priority -9 that would overwrite or overrule something in priority -10, etc., etc.? So this is priority -3. It is pretty important that this walking animation play unfettered. So if I don't have this, I want this to look the same unless something else is happening. I need this to work under almost all circumstances. Fine, except for when I have the hands behind the back. I need to make the original arms disappear and enable that animation. So until such time as it realizes, oh, there's something at priority 5 that overwrites the conditions of priority -3. It's like, oh, in this one, the arms are gone. They aren't there anymore. These arms that would be visible, the priority after this, it's like, oh, it's gone. These arms are no longer displaying. Instead, you will display this animation. So because I have the first one at such a high priority, it's gonna display at under almost all circumstances except for this. Now, if I really wanted to, I could have something that plays at like priority 0, like neutral priority, and it would overwrite priority -3, which would be the walking animation. It would not overwrite priority 5. Priority 5 would overwrite 0, which would overwrite 3. Priority 0 would overwrite -3. That's how that works. So it's not a very... I would not call it the best way to lay this out, because when you see this text box, it's like, what does that mean? In order from lowest to highest. It literally just means, okay, the smaller the number is, the lower the number is, this number it has the most likely chance of being overwritten by something else. The higher number it is, it's like, okay, this overrides all other previous conditions. Same thing with, okay, hands behind the back. That's cool. I want this character to lean forward in a certain way. Ordinarily, they would be walking straight, but I have the animation that says, okay, I want them to lean forward and not do this. I also have it where you can have both of these layers toggle at the same time. And then furthermore, ominous lean is like, okay, well, they're looking like this. And they look like this when they're standing as well. This has to be a higher priority than the standing animation, because standing animation is like, okay, well, they're standing up normally. This is the only thing that overwrites that. Under other circumstances, it's like, okay, you have to have some discretion over which things will and won't work. Like, if I'm sneaking, the lean sort of begins to look a little strange. So do use discretion when you are choosing which animations to overwrite. Like, there are also some features that are only possible if you have the mod installed server-side, such as model scaling. This is done, you have to enable in the settings, you have to enable advanced scaling settings in the editor, and in effects you go to scaling, and you get this tree right here. Now this only works if you have CPM installed server-side and PECUI installed as well. These are all base parameters of PECUI, except for model display. And model display, incidentally, is the only one that will work if you do not have the mod mod installed. So for example, just for purposes of demonstration, I'm going to display the bounding box up here. I'm going to draw the bounding box, and this shows the eye height of my model. Let's say I reset the model scale. I get rid of it. This is how big the model would be. Eye height. Don't worry about it. This is where it would be. So when all is said and done, you have several options for getting your model to work in game. So one, you would export it, and you have several options. You can export it as a skin, which basically, let's say it put the data into this space and this space right here, and the mod will read from that. This is good for if your model is not very big. You don't have to worry about it, because you can just make it a vanilla skin. Like, you could change this in the launcher, and it would work. You don't have to load it in manually. Exporting it as a model means that you can change it on the fly on servers that have it enabled server side. So if you go onto a server that has CPM installed on it, you don't have to change your skin manually. You can just select it. So that's what this menu is here. I have these models that I've made and or edited, and it's like, oh, I can just pick them at random, whatever I want. I can do it. I don't have to change my skin whenever. I can do whatever I want. The world is mine. To get to that, let's say your model is really complex. No matter if you explain, I've never done the base 64 string. I don't know why you would want to do this. This is specific. As a skin, you can export it as an update. You can export it normally. You can export it as an update, or you can export an upload. Like, this is how you would change your skin in game, and then you would just like relog into the server or whatever. Exporting means it just exports it normally. Export and update means you have something already established and you're updating it. Model, you can just do it as is, export and export update. For the skin, you need to have like a file that you're basing it off of. So like, you need to actually have a skin loaded up. So you'd have to be like, oh, export as, this is the file I want it to be exported as. Let's say I want to export the file. I need something more complex, or else this is not going to work. Export. So I overwrite it, and then paste. This is a thing saved locally, I believe, not locally, but saved remotely to the servers of the mod, or like the private repository of like the mod developer, basically. And so you can only have 15 pastes at once. Sometimes it'll complain at you and be like, oh, you exceeded your paste limit, in which case you go into your pastes and you just delete some of the old ones. Like, 14 out of 15. Obviously, like, there are some that I need to delete because they're old. From, like, July. Okay, I don't need to worry about that. This is good for if your model is smaller, if you're just doing small cosmetic changes. Sometimes you'll try and do this. And let's try. It'll complain at me. It'll say it's too big. This is the part where you need to export it as a GitHub gist, which is a little complex if you don't know that. So you need to make a GitHub account. Go to gist.github.com, log in, create secret gist or create new gist, paste in the string it gave you here, hit create secret gist, you would copy and paste it here. And that would be that's how you get that. So you'd save it, it'd be like, okay, whatever, reload models, this is the updated model. I didn't change anything, but that's how you would export something as a gist. Let's say, if you are really interested in making it look good, there are a couple things I would recommend doing. Number one, I would install a mod called Better Third Person. Basically, like, I'm in third person right now, and I'm moving the camera, and my head's not moving. Like, it's not locked to me. As opposed to, like, let's say I were doing it without the mod, it would be like, okay, the model's moving along with the camera. I don't want it to move. I want to observe the model from all angles. So that's good for, like, determining, oh, this is how my model moves in the world. This is how other people are perceiving it. The second thing is, if you want your animations to look good in motion, I would recommend doing something like this, where I've set up this black and white sort of background here, and you can see a personal pet peeve of mine is like this, like right here, like I'm sneaking, and it looks like I'm kind of sliding across the ground because I'm not moving at the same rate my feet are. But if I make the animation any slower, it's gonna look really bad. Whereas, let's say if I'm walking, it looks like I'm actually moving in time. Like, it looks like I'm being propelled at the same rate my feet are moving. So this is Like, same thing with the running. Like, it actually looks like I'm running instead of being sliding along the ground like this, or like this, where they're not in sync. So this is good for just, like, having a clear background of this is how fast you're moving per second. This is how many meters you're moving per second. Past that, it's literally just, like, experimentation, fiddling around with the settings, seeing what you can do. Like, I'm sure that there's a lot of stuff in here that I haven't explained, or not even explained well. This is off the cuff. I didn't make a script for this. A lot of stuff in here that I haven't even explained well, that people have done better than me. I am not an expert. I don't even get paid for this. Just trial and error, and also having fun, and also just accepting, like, sometimes there are things you can't do or make look perfect, and that's fine. Sometimes you just have to, like, accept it. Anyway, I believe that is all. Like I said, I will link the plugin for the CPM plugin. The link for the CPM plugin in Blockbench, I will link that in the description. I will add the credit for the spyglass thing that I found. All of that. Yeah, I hope that sort of addresses some things that have progressed since the last tutorial I made, as well as maybe explains a couple things more in depth. If something is blatantly wrong, I'm so sorry. Anyway, but yeah, thank you for watching. I hope this was helpful in some way.